This is the story of Harold the dog detective and his owner, Tommy. Well, it's really about Harold, and it's about the last time that he was ever seen. It all started innocently enough when Tommy took Harold out for a trot around in the woods. And Harold did the things that a dog would do. He chased chipmunks and he sniffed at trees and he splashed through streams, and he was having a grand old time. He had so much fun, in fact, that he ended up losing track of Tommy, and next thing he knew, he was all by himself. But he was a dog detective, so he figured he'd get it sorted out and would find a way to reunite with his owner when he felt like it. It was then that he heard a growl in the distance and decided to investigate, because that's what detective dogs do. And so he trotted off and entered a glade where he saw a big brown shape. And that shape was growling, it was mad. And so, giving it a second thought, he screwed up his bravery and trotted up to that shape, which turned out to be a bear, and introduced himself and said, "Hi, I'm Harold. I'm a dog detective." To which the bear growled back, "Nice to meet you. Name's Honeypot. Honeypot McFurbottom. Professor McFurbottom." Then, when he noticed that the dog was suitably impressed, the bear quickly added, "I took correspondence classes. I'm an adjunct professor, not tenured." So, introducing the two of them, Harold decided then to say, "Well, what's the matter? Why are you upset?" To which the bear said, "Well, look around you. They took my huckleberries, and they took my blueberries. They took my partridge berries. They even took my bearberries." And indeed, as Harold looked around, all of the berry bushes in that glade had been stripped clean. So Harold told the bear, "Well, you know what? You're in luck, because I am a dog detective. And if there's someone who can bring justice and investigate this crime, it's me. So let's figure this out." And as Harold used his sniffer to look around the glade, he could pick up the scent of berries that had absconded along with a pair of footprints, and said, "Okay, this way. I think we're onto something." And he and the bear went over hill and over glade until they got to a cottage. And that cottage was at the end of a scenic dirt road with a pretty shiny little sports car to one side and smoke coming out of the chimney. And Harold presented the cottage to the bear and said, "Well, there you go. There's the scene of the crime, and the criminals are probably still here." And that's when Professor McFurbottom happened to catch the smell of the most delightful thing. It was just enchanting. It was the smell of cooked berries mixed with butter and sugar and dough and eggs, and just the most wonderful thing. And he spied, or they spied, that there was a pie that had been laid out on the windowsill to cool, mixed berry pie. And Professor McFurbottom, having sniffed at the air, said, "That will do." And he rushed up, lumbered up to that wonderful cooling pie on the windowsill, tipped it down with one paw, and began to feast upon the berries that had been taken from his glade. Nom, 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 nom. There was a ruckus inside the house. Apparently, whoever those visitors were from the big city nearby had noticed that there was a bear that was menacing the outside and had taken their pie. And so the owners, or the visitors who were in the cabin, cast about and managed to find a shotgun and ammunition. And fearing for their lives, there was one big loud kaboom, and the bear fell back mortally wounded with a deep growl. Harold rushed up to the bear, said, "Don't worry, I'll avenge you. I'll figure out some way. Just hang on." The bear had clearly been mortally wounded. He said, "Just hang on. I'll get help. I'll get a veterinarian, an ambulance, police. I'll get something. Just hang tight." And he ran off down the road, knowing that eventually, if he kept following roads, he'd get to some place that was civilization and help. So he ran from the dirt roads to larger roads and even larger roads and through traffic, and finally ended up in a center of town. And there he saw that there were a set of blue lights. Even though dogs are colorblind, they're not completely colorblind. So he could see that there were the sorts of cars that indicated police. And there he slammed his body up against the door a couple of times until he managed to get the door open and burst through the door and saw that there were police officers inside and quickly yelled at them, "You have to come help. My friend's in trouble. He's been mortally wounded. There's been a crime. You've got to bring an ambulance. Please help us." And because the officers didn't understand, all they heard was arf, 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 because dogs can't talk. So the officer, one of the kind-looking officers, turned to the others and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of this." And he took the still barking dog, that is Harold, the dog detective, and he said, "Okay, come here, boy. I'll help you out." And went to the cruiser, opened up the passenger door, and grateful Harold jumped into the passenger side, and the officer stepped in on the driver's side and turned the key, started the car, and drove Harold down to the no-kill animal shelter across town. And that's where he dropped off Harold and where he still is to this day. And if you see him there, he'll tell you his story. Unfortunately, all you'll hear is arf, 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 arf. But he means well, and he is trying to tell you something.